Meeting, please come to order. Barbara, please call the roll.
We have Commissioners Berard, Funderburk, Levine, and Noonan present.
Thank you. Before my opening remarks, which are the next item on the agenda, I'd like to see if other commissioners move. I'd like to move item 3 up to see if we have comments from other commissioners on agendized items and requests from commissioners relating to departmental operations.
Hi.
Commissioner Funderburk?
Yes. Good morning, President Levine and my fellow commissioners, management, and staff. Since our last meeting, we all have witnessed a number of events in our city, our state, our country, and our world. Some of these events have paved the way for remarkable gains. Others have caused incomprehensible loss and suffering. The senseless slaughter of 9 innocent people in the basement of Charleston's Emmanuel AME Church was an unspeakable act of evil. I would ask that we pause for a moment of silence today to honor each of those lives that were taken while I read the names. Tywanza Sanders, Reverend Clementa Carlos Pinckney, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, DePayne Middleton Doctor, Cynthia Marie Graham Hurd, Myra Thompson, Ethel Lee Lance, Daniel Simmons, and Susie Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will move to my opening remarks. As part of my opening remarks, I'd like to introduce the next item on our agenda, which is a report we'll hear from General Manager Edwards and her team responding to the direction provided by this board at our May 19th meeting. DWP staff was directed to bring back a rates proposal to support the 5-year budget and its related revenue requirements. You will recall that those revenue requirements were set forth in an independent analysis conducted by PA Consulting, which was presented at that meeting. Before I turn it over to Ms. Edwards, I'd like to offer a few brief comments. First, today marks the beginning of a process that will unfold over the next 4 to 5 months. It marks the beginning of a dialogue we will have with our customers, with the community, with the ratepayer advocate, with key stakeholders, and importantly with the City Council and the Mayor, who ultimately will be asked to approve any rate adjustments which might be considered by this board. I know that staff has proposed an extensive process of community engagement over the coming months. I anticipate that this will indeed be a dialogue involving both informing our customers and stakeholders of the key priorities and costs, and the proposed staff is setting forth to address them, and most importantly, listening to feedback from these important stakeholders and from the community. So today very much is a beginning, and I look forward to hearing the presentation by the General Manager and staff, and I move to the report and briefing by the General Manager as the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, sir. The proposal we are setting forth today is the result of many, many months of planning work. It's gone into determining first where we could save and cut costs, and second, how quickly can we ramp up replacement of key infrastructure and continue to invest in our conservation programs, while at the same time continuing the historic transformation that is underway in our city's water and power supplies. We've done so with a great deal of thought and with an added analysis by a third-party consultant, which you mentioned in your remarks. Thank you. I'd like to first begin by providing you a quick update on a key issue, which I know you and the board and many of our customers continue to track. The customer service, the billing system, we have 98.7% of the bills being mailed on time. You can see less than 0.5% of the bills now require manual review. I would briefly like to put into perspective, I'm not sure this board understands the magnitude of billing as a whole. There's over 1.5 million power meters. There's 670,000 water meters. All told, we send out 800,000 bills a month, just shy of 10 million a year. So having to manually review and adjust 0.5% is actually a fairly good metric. We have a proposed settlement reached on a class action lawsuit relating to the rollout of the billing system. The critical takeaway there is that process will ultimately lead to ensuring that every customer gets 100% on the dollar, that they pay for what they owe and no more than that. So that's continuing to move forward. Our accounts receivable, that's dropped by what percentage, Dave, in the last?
Accounts receivable have gone down by 33% over the last 5 months.
So we're continuing in the right direction there. So standing with where we stand on our customer billing system remediation and customer service improvement, we're communicating about it to our customers. This is going to be critical as we move forward with a discussion about the major cost drivers behind rates. I think all the members of this board are aware we are in a very capital-intensive business. Utility business, both water and power, has always depended significantly on investing in capital. Majority of our investments we need to make are in infrastructure, and it's very difficult to communicate about the business as a utility and the investments we need to make to continue to provide the highest quality and most reliable power at rates that are lower than other major utilities in California. There are a number of writers and key stakeholders who follow us closely, and they know pretty well what we're faced with, how we need to ramp up replacement of our infrastructure, how labor is actually 25% or less of our costs when you compare to other labor-heavy organizations. Police and fire are a good example. At 80 to 90% of their costs relate to labor. Mine is far more in the area of capital. These key stakeholders, they stay informed, they stay plugged in, but a certain number of our customers just want to make sure the lights turn on and the water runs when they need it. But when you have to ask your customers to discuss rates, you have to explain it, you have to talk about it, and you have to be able to answer their questions. We're prepared to do that, and today marks the start of, as you mentioned, a 4 to 5 month process of doing so. One of the ways we plan to do that is we're going to communicate through some videos. We also have a new website that's entirely dedicated to rates that links to every program, initiative, et cetera, that will go live later today. We're going to be previewing that for you as well. This first video that we're going to show you is an overview of the rate case, but it's only 2 minutes long, and it's just intended to touch on the big bites and give everyone an understanding of the starting point. So with that, Joe, if we could run the first video.
You probably never worry about the water not flowing or the lights not coming on. That's because your LADWP offers some of the most reliable service in the nation. It also happens to be some of the lowest cost as well, an achievement we're proud of and committed to continuing. But to do this in the future, we need to continue to invest in our infrastructure and transform our water and power supplies. That's why we're requesting a rate increase. A low user would see a small increase, while the top 10% would get a larger increase. For the typical customer, it would amount to a $4.75 increase to the monthly bill each year for 5 years. That's about the same as the typical rate of inflation, and will still keep our rates lower than our neighboring utilities. Now, we know what you're thinking. Great, a rate increase. But here's how this will directly improve and protect our city's water and power. 1. 85% of the money will go into replacing old infrastructure. That's things like water pipes, poles, transformers, water tanks, and valves, many of which are nearing the end of their useful life. By making these updates now, we can avoid some costly and disruptive problems in the future. 2. State mandates require that 33% of our power come from renewable sources by 2020, and to eliminate burning coal to reduce harmful greenhouse gas emissions. These funds will be used to continue to transform our power supply to create a clean energy future for Los Angeles. We'll also be expanding our water collection capabilities so we can depend on local water supplies. This will protect us from drought and keep rates down in the future, and reduce our dependence on expensive water that's pumped 300 miles to be here. 3. Funds will also support continued improvement to customer service, improvements that have significantly dropped hold times, and programs that help customers lower their bills by saving water and becoming more energy efficient. Your LADWP is dedicated to creating a reliable and responsible water and energy future for our customers, while keeping rates below those of our neighboring utilities. To learn more, visit myladwp.com.
Thank you. A brief aside, it did mention hold times, and you'll remember at the initial stages of the customer service rollout, we had extensive hold times. Dave, can you tell me what the hold times are averaging this week?
Yeah, they're under 3 minutes on average.
The second video is more focused on the water system, what those cost drivers are, talk about the infrastructure replacement, how we protect ourselves from drought by investing in local water supplies. And then there's a third video, again, both of these are just 2 minutes, that focuses on the power side of our operation, and I'd like to show you. These will, by the way, be available on the website for the public as well.
We're the LADWP. You may only know us as the people that send you a bill every other month for your water, power, and other city services, but there's a lot going on behind that bill. For example, 7,200 miles of pipe. That's enough to stretch from here to Antarctica. And that's just a small part of our water infrastructure that reliably brings water to your tap. Over the last 10 years, we've been replacing old pipes and reducing pipe breaks by 40%. But more infrastructure is reaching the end of its life, and we need to ramp up the rate at which we're replacing it. We're also undergoing a historic transformation to secure LA's water future and protect us from drought. Much of LA's water comes from the melting snowpack off the Sierra Mountains, which flows through the Los Angeles aqueduct and into the city. When there is a drought and the snowpack is light, Los Angeles needs to purchase more water from the California aqueduct and the Colorado River aqueduct. Water from a regional agency that is pumped over 300 miles over mountains to get here. And that water is not cheap. That's why the LADWP is investing in our local water supply. Things like stormwater capture, groundwater cleanup, and recycled water, which will reduce our purchased water by 50% by 2024, better protect us from drought conditions, and help keep rates low in the future. We'll also be continuing our efforts to incentivize conservation in our community, with our Cash in Your Lawn program, rebates for water-efficient products, and free water-saving devices, allowing us to work together to make sure that everyone in Los Angeles has clean, reliable water when they need it. By investing in our infrastructure and our local water supply while incentivizing conservation, the LADWP is building LA's water future. To learn more, visit myladwp.com.
And finally, the power video.
Your LADWP provides reliable power to 1.4 million homes and businesses. Supplying this power takes 15,000 miles of power lines, enough to stretch from here to Australia and back, over 320,000 utility poles, and numerous power plants located here and across the western U.S. Much of our power grid was built in the 1950s and 60s, and more of it is nearing the end of its service life. We've been investing a lot in replacement and upgrades. Power outages are down, and reliability is better than neighboring utilities. But we still have 45% of our poles that are over 60 years old. And that's just part of our aging infrastructure. So the LADWP is ramping up repair and replacement of this equipment so we can continue to provide reliable power to LA's businesses and homes that depend on it. At the same time, we're completely transforming our power supply to create a clean energy future for Los Angeles. State mandates require us to power our city with 33% renewable energy by 2020. So we're expanding our use of solar, wind, geothermal, and other renewable energy sources. We're also required to eliminate our use of coal by 2025. So we're replacing our coal-burning power plants with efficient and cleaner-burning natural gas stations and renewable resources. We're also replacing our ocean-cooled power plants with modern natural gas plants that don't require ocean cooling in order to protect our marine environment, and continuing our investment in energy conservation in our community through programs like electric vehicle charger rebates, consumer appliance rebates, and solar incentives. All in all, these changes represent a replacement of 70% of our existing power supply. Changes that will help us build a more efficient, cleaner energy future for Los Angeles while maintaining reliability and rates lower than our Southern California neighbors. To learn more, visit myladwp.com.
Thank you. As I mentioned, my LADWP.com will go live later today, and I'd like for Joe Romalo very briefly to walk you through the website. They put a tremendous amount of effort into it, and it's part of our interest in getting as much information in front of the consumers on how they use energy, the logic behind our rates, and more importantly, how they can minimize or eliminate rate increases through making behavioral changes and encouraging conservation. Joe?
Thank you. So the website is built on a platform by a company called Nation Builder. So it's a two-way communications platform. It's not just a place where people can go to get information. It's also a place they can sign up to get on a mailing list. We've pre-populated it with a lot of our customer emails already, so it'll give us the capability to not only send newsletters to them, but also understand what information they want from us as they register and as they interact with the site. It's fully integrated with social media. It also, if you pull it up later today on your iPhone or your iPad, you'll see it's fully optimized for those devices as well. Just a brief tour through the homepage and then a couple of the key sites and features. It's just a splash page that you come to. And what I will mention here is that Reggie and I were dealing with this, is that it looks so much better on a regular computer. You're seeing this distorted because it's being broadcast over the web right now as well through that system, through the system we have. So this is let me scroll through. You immediately can get quickly to the rate case fact sheet as well as the FAQ, frequently asked questions. Our video is prominently featured. This is the overview video that we showed first. And then a number of the slides that you're going to see in the presentation that the GM and senior staff are going to present are featured here on the homepage. Just a quick way to get a good information about what the rate case is about, how much more we need, how it'll impact our customers, and then also information about how much our customers have saved. This is good information over the last 3 years, how our bills will compare moving forward. This is a navigation where they can click here, and I'll take you there in a moment to show you about the rate case, all of the key facts and information. There's a survey we want to ask customers to take to tell us more about what they like, what they don't like, what more they want to see from the department. And then another key feature of this, we wanted to make it a place people could come and easily get information about ways they can save water and power and money. It's really the foundation of our rate case, putting our customers first through these themes that you'll continually hear throughout the rate case. Also, key news stories that we can post here. We can share these on Facebook, Twitter, other social media. One I'll point out is on our pool pumps that we've already loaded up here. This ran on Channel 5, and it was a great feature story showing how our customers can save money and electricity on their bills. All of our events will be posted here with RSVP features, the ability as well to share, and then our Facebook and our Twitter feed. If I go up here at the navigation, there's a number of areas for you to explore. The one I wanted to show you especially is how to save. So any customer that clicks on this, depending on what type of customer they are, they can go right to the next page for single-family residents and get, these are all the programs from our energy efficiency and water conservation teams. All the information they have available that exists on our website right now, but it's just a little bit harder to find in one convenient place. So if you click on the links to any of these, they'll take you through to the correct page on LADWP.com for these programs. It's the same for business customers, property owners and managers. We also just have a quick navigation here for the various sites. News, this is the, just take you to one last page on our rate request. This is really the meat of the entire rate case, and people can get all the information they need here, as well as the videos that we showed you. So with that, I can turn it back over to the GM.
Thank you. Joe did point out where you can download or view FAQs, where you can download and view fact sheets. We distill this information because, as you know, the utility information is extremely detailed. And while we will be presenting that to the community and to this board as well, many people prefer to structure their initial understanding in a more way that's easier to digest. So you can get these tools. The other things that are going to be available on the site, these were the two documents that we developed that analyzed both the water system and the power system, broke it into the big bites, talked about how did we analyze those bites, how did we rank it for replacement. So any of the more specifics regarding infrastructure for either water or power are available in these. Okay, with that, we're going to transition into what we call the rate deck or PowerPoint presentation. These are, and again, this is in some respects restating the obvious, because these are the priorities for our rate request. And I know we continue this mantra of infrastructure, but to me it is literally the underpinnings of everything that we do. And so we need to continue to highlight that. The transformation of both water and power, improving our local supplies, moving coal out of our portfolios, and finally improving customer service. There are a variety of additional customer service mechanisms we want and need to be able to make available to our customers. And more importantly, we want them to be able to communicate with us and ensure that we are meeting their needs. So that continues to be a major investment. This is a pie chart that shows, from the standpoint of where is some of that revenue going, and again, it's an effort to try to simplify it. 75% of the new revenues on the power side are to meet regulatory mandates and continue to move us toward a clean energy future in LA. The remainder, the 25%, is split between an enhanced infrastructure replacement program as well as fuel, which is typically market-driven. On the water side, 85% of the new revenues are going into infrastructure improvements for reliability and water quality requirements. And with that, I'll transition to our CFO, Jeff.
Okay, so back in the last rate action in 2012, there are a number of items that came from the City Council, from the ratepayer advocate, and the mayor. All of those items, I won't go through all of them, but the top three we have made significant progress and completed. The first one, negotiate a new labor contract to save costs. On the next slide, I'll talk about that in more detail. We completed the first phase of benchmarking, which we presented to this board, and we conducted cost of service studies, which are guiding us on these new rates. Go to the next one, Joe. So the cost savings, one of the biggest cost savings we had was the new labor contract. This labor contract had no cost of living adjustments for 3 years. It also had a new Tier 2 pension, which was key, as we have 42% of our workforce that is able to retire in the next 5 years. So by having that Tier 2 pension, it's going to save us going forward especially. And just one thing, these cost savings that we've gone through have allowed the water system has gone 5 years without a base rate increase, and that's important to remember. The power system, 3 out of the last 5 years, has had no base rate increase. Go to the next slide. So the benchmarking, just a summary of what we presented earlier this year. The most critical benchmark is really total O&M per customer. And when we look at both water and power, we are within the median. So we're essentially in line with our industry peer set. And remember, 70 to 75% of that O&M comes from labor, which is a portion of our cost, but again, the most key. Our reliability metrics on both water and power are first and second quartile. But the one thing it did show us is our distribution capital spending, which is the power reliability or power system reliability program. Looking back for the last 3 years was under where we should be, and that's something that we're going to propose in this rate increase. Our customer service O&M costs, we're certainly lower than investor-owned utilities, but we're higher compared to publicly owned. So the answer is somewhere in the middle, which is what David is working on and we're working on going forward. We need to spend some more money in customer service. Our rates are competitive. So this comparison here, again, it gets lost or not reported at all, is that our rates are low. And when you look at this comparison, we've added in the increases for us in 15-16 and fiscal year 15-16 and 16-17. And where available, we've done it for these other cities. And you can see in this peer set, we are the lowest costs for a typical residential customer after the rate increases, with some of those cities not showing the additional rate increases that they would have. And with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Thank you. There's been a number of power system accomplishments. The first being completing Haynes Generating Station, which reduced our once-through cooling by 50%. The state mandated that we stop using seawater to cool our power stations that were near the coast. So we're halfway through that process. We will bring Scattergood on in December of 2015. Then there's a number of additional power generating station repowering that will take place over the next 15 years, and we need to be completely off of once-through cooling by 2029. The Power System Reliability Program, we've started ramping that up significantly. Pole replacements are up 42%, transformer replacements up almost 30%, distribution circuits up over 130%. If you remember in the video, it said we have about 320,000 power poles. Well, 90,000 of them are between 60 and 100 years old, and 60 years old is the estimated life of a power pole. So we've really got to be replacing those poles through the next several years. Local solar, we have over 13,000 locations with solar of over 111 megawatts of net metered energy. And as you know, we're ramping up the feed-in tariff program, and we're developing the community solar program. A really large area that we're looking at as well is to increase energy efficiency by 15% by 2020. We're on target to meet that. Energy efficiency programs help reduce customer bills. So the more that we can reduce their energy usage, the more it helps us by not having to obtain more power, but it especially helps the customer by not having the energy bills that they had before because they're reducing their energy usage. And we have a number of programs, about 17, with all the different customer segments that we have right now. With that, I'll turn over to Marty.
Thank you. The water system's had a number of great accomplishments in the last year as well, and we continue to build great infrastructure projects that are helping us to meet the new water quality mandates and also continue with the infrastructure replacement in our streets. Things that we've had this last year that have been particularly noteworthy, as the board is well aware, we had a historic agreement achieved on Owens Lake. That, in fact, has resulted in saving on nearly 9,000 acre-feet of water this year. We did the tilling that we agreed to, and that's water for more than 43,000 people, and that's saving not only water, but saving money in purchased water that all the customers are benefiting from. So we are seeing the fruits of that agreement already. We have placed in service the second largest ultraviolet disinfectant plant in the nation, and we're about to break ground on the new second largest ultraviolet plant in the nation. So it's been great for our meeting our water quality mandates. With that, we've also placed 97 million shade balls on Los Angeles Reservoir, which has almost completely reduced our need for chemical use in the reservoir, helped us to meet all the water quality mandates, and as part of a program that with this selection, the suite of projects that we're pursuing, is going to save the ratepayers between $250 to $350 million versus the original projects that we'd envisioned to do. We continue to replace over 100,000 feet of main line a year. In spite of main breaks and other things that we see that we're dealing with, our crews are out there in the street every day replacing pipe and getting after the infrastructure issues. And then lastly, we've seen great strides in water conservation efforts. With the mayor's directive, we've increased our rebate for turf removal to $3.75 a square foot. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 million square feet of turf removal in Los Angeles. We've increased our policing. We've had customers report thousands of violations, and we are out there active in the streets on a daily basis enforcing the city's water conservation ordinance. And so we see between what we've done to encourage the customers and also enforce the policies, we are seeing the city's water demands continually drive down month after month, corresponding to the goals that the mayor set out for us.
These next series of slides are going to focus on the priorities for needed revenue investments and attempt to tell the story of what's driving the need for rate adjustments. Obviously, the priorities are going to continue to include infrastructure, the drought, transforming our water and power supplies, the mandates we face, and the focus on the customer experience. Marty?
So the first thing we look at in terms of water is infrastructure, and you only have to go to the Grand Canyon, you know how powerful water is, and then you see it right here at Sunset behind UCLA when we had the trunk line break. And this really underscored the reason that we're concerned about water pipeline infrastructure and the need to increase our rate of replacement. Pipeline breaks are expensive. We know that even a small break can run $10,000 to $30,000 to fix, and that's without damages to the neighboring community. A break such as a sunset break lost about 4 to 5% of that day's supply of water, and during this time of drought, keeping the water inside the pipes is becoming eminently important. And we look at breaks such as the previous one 5 years before in Coldwater, where we spent nearly $700,000 repairing a break. And that's money that all it did was fix the pipe. We need to be investing that money in the infrastructure and the major trunk lines and put that money to good use.
Really quickly, the takeaway also on this slide is the entire effort is intended for us to do more proactive maintenance and not reactive maintenance. This job is estimated to cost well over 3 times what a proactive replacement of this portion of trunk line would have cost since we were forced to react. Go ahead.
So what we have done with our mainline replacement, and we are seeing the results, is that back in 2006, 2007, we began to ramp up our rate of replacement in conjunction with the last base rate increase we got. And so we went from about 65,000 feet of pipe replacement a year, it's about 12 miles of replacement, to about 28 miles of replacement a year, which is what we're doing right now. And we correspondingly see that we've reduced the amount of leaks by about 40%. Right now, we're at sort of a steady state. So we're replacing pipe at that rate. Leaks are starting to level out. But we know we have a lot of aging infrastructure coming up. We have a lot of pipe that's nearing 100 years in life, and we need to get after that mountain of pipe that's coming at us. And so what we intend to do is to increase our rate of replacement until we get to 50 miles a year of pipe. That'll reduce our age. Right now we have a 280-year replacement cycle. We want to drive that down to a 150-year replacement cycle. We believe that's sustainable and something that we'll need to do for the city for the future, and that'll continue to drive the leak rate down as well. The other aspect we have going with our rates and what our big expenditures are is to change our mix of water resources. Historically, we relied on the LA Aqueduct. When I started here, it was almost 70% of the supply for the city, and we know that our long-term average now is about a third of the supply for the city, and of course in years like this current year, it's less than 10% of the supply. And so during that time, we've had to buy more and more water from the Metropolitan Water District, and that costs our ratepayers directly, and it continues to drive rates. So it's been the goal of the agency to reduce our reliance on MWD, and then the mayor's actually increased that, how fast we get to that goal, asked us by 2024 to reduce by half our reliance on imported waters that we purchase from MWD. We intend to do that by increasing our local water resources. And the keys to that would be more investments in water conservation. We, right now, on the graph on the left, we have about 17 to 18% conservation built in already. We intend to continue to increase that above what we're doing right now. We are going to do stormwater capture, which will be some direct water offset, but a lot of that will be groundwater augmentation. We're going to increase our use of recycled water dramatically. A lot of that will also be in groundwater. And so then the key becomes the groundwater. We have to clean up our well supply and be able to use these other supplies that we're going to put and store in the ground, where it'll become our local reservoir. And ultimately, the groundwater will be about 25% of the water supply within the next 10 years for the city.
So this chart will show the spending and the changes in spending that Marty just mentioned. If you look up on the top, you can see the historical average on the left-hand side is the last 2 fiscal years, what we've been spending. So the infrastructure replacement, we're going to ramp that up to about 75% in comparison to the last 2 years. The supply transition, you can see all the different local water supply and conservation and what we're going to do there. That's going to be increased by 2.5 times what we spent over the last 2 years. And down the bottom, you look at the Owens Valley regulatory going from $103 million to $217, with a portion of that is going to help us to save water from the lake as well. So all of this additional spending that we're talking about, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, what is it made up of? Well, it's made up of about 93.5% is going to be contracts, outside contracts, services, construction, all of those different things, which we think is going to be about 2,600 outside jobs, much of it in Los Angeles. Only roughly 6.5% of that will be for additional spending on our internal labor at DWP. On the next slide. So where that was the spending, this is the revenue. So over the 5 years, we're talking about an additional $230 million. So the difference between the 560 per year and then the 230 total is the amount of debt that we're going to issue. Part of this plan is ensuring that we maintain our financial metrics that were approved by your board, and we're going to issue the debt to support all those different spendings. But number one, when you look at this, and 63% of this is purely for water infrastructure program, for all of the new pipes, for all of the regulator stations. 22% is for water quality, which is really infrastructure as well. And the remaining 11% is for local water supply, and 4% of that is for Owens Valley, which is really a regulatory requirement as well. And then turn it over to Dave.
So this shows several examples of our aging power infrastructure, and there are issues throughout the entire city. Transformers, underground cables, poles, cross arms, all need some sustained infrastructure investment. It has taken a number of decades for this deterioration to occur. It's going to take some time to make the necessary improvements, but you can see there are some examples of things that are no longer in service or no longer working. We need some proactive investment in our infrastructure, and this shows why. And Marcie had touched on this a little earlier in the water areas, did Marty. But the top example is the Owens Gorge Control Plant. Because of funding and competing priorities, there was a $10 million level of work that could be done in a planned format, but a forced outage required that same work on an emergency basis, cost 6 times as much. $10 million if it could have been done on a planned basis. It was $60 million on that emergency basis. Down in the bottom example, that's an area where we put some strong attention towards replacing some distribution transformers. In 2007, there was a heat storm. We had over 28,000 customers without power for over 24 hours. We replaced more than 2,750 transformers since that time. In 2014, we had a very similar heat storm, though a little longer, a little hotter. We had 195 customers without power for over 24 hours. So a reduction of more than 28,000 customers without power. Customers without power affects not only their lives, but the economy. So it has a great impact.
If I could interrupt briefly, we are working with an outside firm to try to provide the board with some cost estimates as to the impacts of power and water outages. A lot of times we focus on the investment and how much it costs comparatively, but we just assume the impacts to the economy and to business of being out of power are zero, and they're far from it. So we're working to try to pull that in so that you have something that you can be able to compare and contrast with.
Looking at our power supply and the transition and mandates, our energy portfolio is changing, and this shows 2013 on the left and 2020 on the right. What you can notice most graphically, and what jumps out at you, is over that 5-year period, we're cutting our coal usage in half. And in fact, by 2025, that piece should be gone because we'll be off coal by that point in time. You'll also see the renewables ramping up to the 33% mandate in 2020, so up by 10% from where we were in 2013. And one of the other areas that shows a really significant change, again, is that energy and efficiency. We're making a very significant investment in that to compose 15% of our power portfolio is made up of reductions from energy from power usage by increased energy efficiency. And again, that really helps customers because it cuts their bills. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jeff.
So this slide shows the spending differences for the power, similar to what we saw in the water, the historical average for the last 2 fiscal years. So on the infrastructure, we're going to ramp that up by 70%, going from an average of $525 million to $895 million. The supply transition and mandates is increasing by 40%, from a little under $800 million to $1.1 billion. And the energy efficiency is essentially tripling when you look at this, from 61 million to 176. That provides a variety of mitigation measures that customers, both on a residential and commercial, can utilize to lower their bill. And again, in the bottom right, similar to what we saw on water, 93% of this additional spending, which we're looking at here, about $800 million, is going to be in contract services, construction services, those types of things. Roughly 7.5% is going to be towards internal labor. So on the outside contracts, by conservative estimates, we're looking at this will result in about 3,700 additional jobs per year for all of this work. So if you combine that with what we looked on water, it's about 6,300 jobs more as a result of this rate action. The revenue needs, similar to what we saw on water. If you look here, basically going from noon to about 9 o'clock on the pie chart, is 75% is for mandates and supply transition. You can see all of the different things: renewable energy, local solar, coal replacement, repowering, energy efficiency. The mandates are driving roughly 75% of it. The remaining 25%, 15% is for that additional rebuilding of our infrastructure, and then 10% is the fuel that again, as Marcie touched on, is market driven. The next chart is now to
Beth, if I can offer some introductory comments to this particular slide, and then I'll give it back to you. We were working to find a way that customers could easily understand the impacts of this rate adjustment on their bill over time. And we thought one of the easiest ways to do that would be to take, as an example, a low-use residential customer, the top. Here's what their monthly bill is now. If you go down to the bottom, that's what their monthly bill would be at the conclusion of 5 years of rate increases. And I think it ends up being, what is the total? Because you put such small print on here, I can't.
$9.
Yeah. So at the end of this time, their bills will be $9 higher for that particular group. So I just wanted to help you frame, because this is a very busy chart. Go ahead.
Sure. And the first part of that is the low-use residential. So that is the lowest consumption, of 30% lowest consumption of our customers. And as Marcie touched on, they're going to see between water and power roughly a 2.4% increase per year. And their current monthly bill is roughly $76. At the end of 5 years, it'll be a little under $86. The typical residential, which is 50 percentile, or you have roughly 50% of the customers below that, 50% above it, we'll see about a 3.4% increase, or a $475 per month or per year monthly increase. So at the end of those 5 years, they'll go from $132 to about $156. The high-use residential, now this is our top 10% consuming customers at 900 kilowatt hours per month and 27 HCF, or 100 cubic feet per month. So those customers, because we have conservation-based rate making, you're going to see a higher percentage increase in those customers, and that's where you see the 5.4%. Now, we've touched a little bit about energy efficiency. One thing to look at, if these customers have a single-speed pool pump, which indeed many of them being top 10% could, we have a $1,000 rebate that's been out for about 2 months, and it's very active right now, but that could save these customers 15% of their energy consumption. 15%,
right off the top, which dwarfs what we're asking for, and the most important takeaway there is people need to utilize these incentives and rebates. They can basically eliminate or reduce what they're paying of any of these rate implications when still allowing us to invest in the infrastructure.
And again, it's more cost effective for us to do the energy efficiency. The small commercial, you can see on the right-hand side, is roughly a 3.5% increase per year. And then on the next page, I see, okay, keep going. And then on the next page is for commercial customers. And again, more difficult to show what the bill is because there's such a variety of medium and large commercial customers. But they're looking at roughly a 4.5% increase on the power, and the water is from a 2.4 to 2.8% increase on the water side. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nancy.
So, yeah, thanks. So you've heard already that part of what we're trying to do is to show people how they can save money and really offset a lot of the increase and the goals that we have, the 15% energy efficiency by 2020 and the water conservation goals that Marty talked about. And we have a number of different kinds of programs that help our customers to manage their bills, to help the environment, and also to help us by helping us to save money that we would otherwise need to spend to acquire these resources. The energy efficiency programs, we have 17 current programs. You've heard about pool pumps, but there are a number of other commercial consumer residential rebates for appliances, audits and installations to look at the whole home energy use. Also, a refrigerator exchange program for our low-income customers. It's been very popular and very effective. Also aimed at our commercial and industrial customers, again, rebates for different kinds of appliances and different kinds of lighting and cooling systems and things like that. Audits, again, for those kinds of customers. We are measuring the effectiveness of our energy efficiency programs under state law. We need to have a third-party evaluation of our programs. We have that third party. These evaluations include customer surveys and interviews, but also the methodology for how we verify our savings. On the water conservation side, a number of different kinds of programs. Again, the kinds of straightforward rebates on appliances, on washing machines and toilets, on irrigation, low-flow irrigation, the lawn replacement program that Marty talked about, and our water conservation response unit that gets out to the public to help make sure they understand what the requirements of the city are. And again, we've been measuring the effectiveness of our water conservation programs through our installed devices that have come through our rebate programs. We've saved over 110,000 acre-feet per year of water, a lot of it through the toilet replacement program, our high-efficiency toilet rebates. We've saved almost 50,000 acre-feet of water, and our landscape incentive programs, as you heard, replaced over almost 15 million square feet of turf, and that's saved literally hundreds of millions of gallons of water. We also offer programs and incentives for customers who are interested in solar and on electric vehicle charging, and that also helps them to save money and help the environment.
Okay. So on the next page is showing industry trends on the power side. So again, all of these utilities have similar pressures and regulations that we have, and they have announced some of the rate increases. We've shown what increases we know about. But when you look at this, in this comparison, there's only one utility that's below us, and that's Sacramento Municipal Utility District. They have access to a lot of low-cost hydropower. But even with our rate increases, we are second, and many of the utilities you'll see in here have not announced what those rate increases will be. But we're certain that they're going to have some form of a rate increase. On the next page, same thing on the water. Again, we have very competitive rates, and you can look here, we're below the median in this comparison with some of the utilities down below that have Superfund cleanups in Burbank and whatnot, but we're very competitive. They are going to have the same thing. This includes higher costs for our purchased water in the current day as well. So, water rate restructuring. One of the directives is to, in a number of fashions, including from this board, is conservation-based rate making. DWP was on the forefront in the early 90s creating tiered rates. And you can see on the left-hand side with that 496, which is Tier 1, and then 590, which is Tier 2. That was on the forefront in the early 90s. Now, many other utilities have actually gone to 5- and 6-tier rates, and our proposal is to go to 4 tiers. So let me briefly go through that. We have aligned the cost of supplying the water with the tiers for the use of the water. So each one of these costs, as you see it, we look at what are the costs to supply that. The first tier is for basic use. That is for indoor use, 8 HCF. It's essentially 200 gallons per day for about $1.18 per day. And the key to look at that, when you look at the tier pricing for 445, it's below by 50 cents what the current Tier 1 price is. Tier 2 is for efficient use, and I won't say what ETAF, because Marcie will throw that water bottle across the boardroom.
Sure.
It's essentially 45% of the water you need to water your lawn. So it's California drought-tolerant landscape. So if you use the appropriate amount of water for that, you will be in Tier 2 usage. It's important to remember, you can see on the right-hand side, 55% of our customers in their usage today will not come out of Tier 1 or Tier 2. So that's a very important piece of data. Tier 3 it gives 135% of the water you need for a lawn. And that's at a higher use because, again, we have now more expensive purchased water that we need for that, to supply that water. And then Tier 4 is really excessive use. So that's more costly sources such as recycled water. Only 9% of our customers today would see Tier 4 usage. So it's a very small amount. And if we look by zip code, we have 3 different temperature zones. The top 4 are, 3 of the top 4 are in the low temperature zone. So the lower temperatures, so they don't see as much temperature. And then the medium is one that you might recognize. The zip code is 90210. So that's tells you where that higher usage is. It is not out in the top 4. It is not out in the valley. If we go to the next, additional rate changes. So these are ones we're just not going to go through in detail. But the reliability pass-through factors. It's key that we have this ability. The city of Los Angeles was built between 1920 and 1970, essentially. So it took 50 years to build the city. It's going to take us a while to replace that. We need to have the ability to get those revenues to do it, and we need to align those revenues with the spending. Many times the spending will be slower than what we were actually projecting. By having a pass-through factor, it will go up and down with the actual spending. Your board will be able to approve that pass-through on an annual basis. That's the proposal right now. We're planning on restructuring rates to encourage conservation to maintain appropriate revenue. So conservation on both water and power is the most cost-effective way of providing supply. But we need to encourage, or we need to ensure that we have financial stability. We're going to do decoupling that we had on the power for 2 years. NRDC worked with us to get that implemented on the power. We're going to do it for both water and power going forward. Rebalancing of customer classes, we've done that based on the latest cost of service study. And then the power access charge, this is a charge that we're going to have for residential customers based on how much energy a customer consumes. Now, all those rates that we showed earlier included this charge, but this is really, I think, an innovative charge that was developed in contrast to what you've seen in some other utilities where they've tried to have a $50 fixed charge, for example, which really penalizes low-consuming customers. We're going to have tiered charges based on how much the customers consume going forward. And with that,
Before you leave that last slide, if you could back up one, Joe, for me. I do want to make one more comment on the reliability pass-through, because not only does it add an element of predictability, but it also adds greater transparency because it's linked to the actual spending, and the spending is controlled by the budget. And so if we can't spend it, we don't collect it. Whereas if you just set rate increases, you're collecting money that potentially you can't spend for 2 years or 3 years. So it's intended to more closely connect that so people can see basically what they're getting for their money. The other question I get on the fact that this is a 5-year term is, to what extent are we going to be able to adjust and correct? And based on some anecdotal input from the ratepayer advocate, we're going to have an opener midway so that everyone can stop and regroup and ensure that we are on the appropriate path. Go ahead. We have an extensive outreach planned. We have regional meetings. We're going to do webinars. We're going to be out at the neighborhood councils. There is a substantial amount of process. You've walked through the website, seen the videos. So there's going to be a substantial amount of information out there. And I'll close with the timeline. As was mentioned earlier, this is just the beginning of a process. And we have presented what our proposal is at this juncture to you. Now the neighborhood councils get 120 days to review it, to ask questions, to hear our presentations. So that will start. We'll be working with the business community, obviously, along that same timeline. And we are expecting rates to come back to this body in October. And assuming that other analysis and other changes, whatever happens at that point happens, it'll probably be to the mayor and council in late November, early December. So as I said, this is really just the kickoff of that process. And I think with that, if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for a very thoughtful and comprehensive presentation. Are there questions from commissioners at this point? Commissioner Funderburk.
I guess one of my first questions is, Madam General Manager, is what will happen if you don't get this rate increase?
That's a fair question. We've talked about the implications to infrastructure. We've tried to lay that out. You will continue to see deteriorations and greater pipe leaks. You know, the age of this equipment is such that there's no way we can prevent that without some additional investment. But there's also some real critical timing issues. As an example, when the once-through cooling, that's where we can't use ocean water in our seaside generating plants. When once-through cooling was passed, it was with a date that we had to comply by 2020. And it was an amazing amount of money. We negotiated to stretch out our time to transition all of our plants to 2029. But that requires that we put $600 million into scattergood between now and 2020 to meet the timetable that was established. If we don't meet that timetable, everything reverts to 2020. And that's a $2 billion price tag. So timing of investment is extremely critical. There's also civil and criminal penalties associated with not meeting the prescribed timeline. So that's one implication. I think with respect to water, we won't be able to meet the goals that have been set by the mayor and the governor, which is critical for us to be able to do. And we've got to continue to put more in the water infrastructure. That's becoming more and more evident. So those would be the type of implications we're going to run into.
And along those lines, we're pushing conservation, but who's going to pick up the stranded costs? Who's going to pick up the bill for all of this conservation? Do we get a credit or anything for that, or what happens with that when people stop using our utility that they love so dearly?
Let me rephrase the question and tell me if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
If by using less water, is that what driving rates up, that stranded investment? I'm not quite sure I'm hearing you.
Yeah, I mean, if say we meet our conservation goals, is that built into all your models for the pricing?
I believe so, but I'll have Marty answer.
Okay.
So in that regard, saving water is the same thing as us losing the equivalent amount of revenue. And so the amount of money that we need in total to do the projects that we've projected is no different. So the rate adjustment to get that amount of money that it takes to put in pipe and maintain infrastructure, we have to account for the less sales. So one of the things this does is provide some stabilization to make sure that we have the funding we had. But saving water is not going to cost people more money necessarily. It's just we have to have the amount of money that it takes to run the agency. And so part of this does is fix some disparities as sales go down, but our requirements to deliver remain the same. We want to make sure that we have the revenue that we need to meet the future demands and meet the infrastructure requirements.
Commissioner, I think maybe I didn't explain it well enough, but on that last part of the slide when we talked about ensuring financial stability, that's the decoupling mechanism, which is built for the very thing you're talking about, is it establishes as a percentage of our total revenue what is the amount of base rate revenue we need for those fixed costs. And that will be, with the decoupling mechanism, that will be taken care of.
There were two things when I looked at the minutes from my first board meeting and that I talked about that I want to repeat. Stormwater is an asset, it's not a liability. And I asked to be kept up to date. I want to thank Marty Adams for doing that. I also want to thank the input of people like Tony Wilkinson and Jack Humphreyville, who have helped, I think, our staff sharpen their pencils a little on some of these projects. And I specifically noticed that we're talking a lot about recapturing this vast amount of stormwater, yet it's only 3% on the pie chart. But I believe that a slice of the other pieces of pie are going into the stormwater repiping The New York Times had an article yesterday or the day before about needing to replumb the entire western United States, and I think stormwater recapture is more than just one thing. Can you expand on how water, stormwater recapture, recycling may be a little bit more than just 3% of our total pie?
Yes, so we have two kind of new sources. We have the new stormwater that's above and beyond what we're capturing now. And some of that will be offsets of potable water demands. And whereas people catch stormwater for rain gardens and cisterns and use on their own property, some of that also becomes groundwater. And recycling is the same way. We have some water that will sell directly to customers for purple pipe, so irrigation water, or advanced treated water for refineries and that sorts of use. Then there'll be a large part of recycled water that also becomes groundwater. So ultimately, the groundwater becomes how we'll see more drinking water into the system as we clean up the groundwater and have these new sources add to that supply. About 25% of our future water supply by 2024 will be from local groundwater, but it won't be the exact groundwater we have today. It'll be the groundwater plus additional stormwater plus recycled water added in. So there are nuances to those percents as to how they actually become drinking water for us.
So is stormwater more like 15 or 20%, or what? Is it just 3%? Or?
Well, stormwater is most of what's the current groundwater 12% right now today. And so then it's moving up percentage-wise, both in terms of adding to the groundwater and then in terms of becoming its own source of water that we don't have to sell. So it'll be more than just the 3%. It's kind of embedded in some of the other aspects.
And on customer service, which was abysmal when we first got on this commission, and Commissioner Barad, and all the commissioners, I think, and it's improved, and I really appreciate it, General Manager Edwards. But we have a ways to go to make progress. What can we take to our ratepayers, to the people at the neighborhood council level that Commissioner Barad's been a leader in, that I've just been a small part of? What can we take to the ratepayers in terms of what we're going to do to make the customer experience better than it is right now, to bring the agency more in alignment with what other utilities are spending on keeping their customers happy? And regardless whether the media is here or not, I want people to hear this, because I cannot stand it to hear that we are the lowest cost provider in the market. Other investor-owned utilities, they don't hold a candle to us. And so if you have a business out there that wants to relocate or is thinking of leaving Los Angeles, think twice, because you are going to pay more for your electricity and for your water. Yet, you would think that DWP is the highest cost provider, as much as people are upset with us. We have little things that are creating big PR problems, and what can we do to align what we're giving to our customers in terms of the efficiency, cleanliness, reliability of our water and power with what they perceive we're actually doing?
Okay. First is what you alluded to. When you came on board and over the last year and a half or so, a lot of fixing of customer service related items. We're really turning that corner, heading into the kind of the final stretch, if you will. We've reduced the wait time significantly. We've hired a number of staff to not only work, the telephones, but also to ensure that billing is accurate, that bills are going out on time, that estimates are down. We're focusing on collections. As I stated, the over 60-day amount has gone down $180 million in 5 months, or 33%. So the first stage truly is continuing to work all the remediation to get to that level where that's behind us. Then beyond that, it's to continue improving the customer service experience by continuing reduced wait times, by providing additional opportunities for them to contact us through self-service, through phones, through interactive, through the web, any way possible. We're looking at all ways we can improve the customer experience to make it easier for them to do business with us. We've got to continue the messaging to customers to say just what you said. Our rates are some of the lowest around. We'll have improved customer service. We'll have, you want to contact us, we're there. We have the programs that they'll need. So all of those different aspects are continued as part of the process of that customer experience, the touching the customer, the bringing it all together through kind of one image, one process, making it as easy as possible for customers to contact us with whatever they want to do, programs, service, initiation, payment arrangement, whatever they will need.
Well, I personally think we're going to have to do better, and I think we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to continue to do it, and to continue to make improvements, because I don't think that we are where we want to be. One of the last things I want to touch on is a theme throughout, and that is maybe things that I can get briefings on at some point later, but the issue of equity as it relates to this, and that's last but not least, certainly probably the most important. We've touched on the tier billing for the additional rate charges for lower income customers. I'd like to see some more specific numbers on those, and I'd like to compare it to the subsidy that we're giving to the high temperature areas. I'd also like to see some, Joe, you talked about customer emails by the email database that you're populating in terms of communication. I'd like to see that by zip code, and I'd like to know whether it's only the affluent people that are being communicated with, because there's a digital divide still. Everybody seems to have access to the internet, but not everybody takes advantage of it. It's directly correlated with people in lower income areas that don't have as much of the access. So I'd like to see some indication as to how our outreach is going to touch the more transient people who are renters, who may not be in our electronic database. And for instance, I've heard since I got on this board how difficult it is to get people to sign up for electronic billing, even though we pay people to do it. I mean, do you have any idea how many people we bill electronically now, residential?
It's over 230,000.
So that amounts to a quarter.
True, but it's significantly higher than it was, and we continue to push that out.
Dr. Pickle, what's the average for public utilities for electronic billing?
I don't have that number offhand. I will get it to you.
I think we should know that. I think my point being is, it's great to talk about these things that are reaching, the people who can afford to do them. But what about the people who can't afford? And are they being reached? Are they being given an opportunity for input?
I would like to make one observation, is that unlike a lot of utilities, both private and public, who've been closing their walk-in centers and moving people deliberately onto electronic tools, DWP has continued to maintain 15 customer service centers located all over the city. And we do utilize those as a means of outreach to the people who walk in basically with $10 in their hand and want to pay their bill.
And that's a good point, but I happen to know somebody from South Central whose center closed, and they are elderly, they can't make, and they were, so I think that that's good that we have kept most of the centers open, but I think that some of them have closed, and unfortunately they're not in areas that are
If I could add one thing, we have for the last about 4 or 5 years had a relationship with a number of community-based organizations where we fund outreach because exactly your point of get people where they live. And so they've been helping to educate our customers in multiple languages with organizations that people in various parts of the city are very familiar with that reach a lot of low-income customers as well as a lot of our diverse communities.
Some of the other communication strategies we're going to use is including the fact sheet and the information prominently displayed in those customer service centers as well as the on-bill messaging that everybody gets, in addition to the community meetings in those areas as well. So there will be more traditional communications methods, not just the online and digital.
And because how many of our population is, at least speaks Spanish as a secondary language and possibly do we know these numbers?
The website is also produced in Spanish.
How many of our population do we know speaks demographically speaks Spanish as a first language?
We don't have the demographic reports, sir. We'd be happy to get you one.
Great. I think that these are important things. I think that it comes down to knowing our customer and being able to communicate with our customers. So I raised those for that reason. I mentioned Tony Wilkinson and Jack Humphreyville, and I really appreciate the education I've gotten from Jack. I've sat next to him at Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council meetings, and I don't always agree with him, but he's a concerned citizen. I think that we'll need to, I would like to see stormwater recapture expand much more significantly, but it costs money, and we're getting to a point where we need to refine the numbers to make sure it's economic, but I also think that there's a overall benefit to having water security in our basin that we can control, that we don't have to worry about an aqueduct pipe shearing during an earthquake or something else catastrophic. There's a benefit that, as General Manager Edwards said, to quantifying the externalities of not having accidents. And I think that those are very important, and I think that they can help us as board members communicate to ratepayers why we're asking for more money, making some of these investments. So I'll have a lot more, and I think that Nancy would really like to continue working with you and your staff. They've been wonderful. They've been really great on trying to work with me on some economic development and other types of issues that impact people who are powerless, who don't have a voice, who don't have the time to show up at these meetings because they're working and they have families to take care of. But overall, thank you for the presentation. I thought it was thorough. I look forward to getting some of the follow-up that I've asked for.
Commissioner Barad.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank General Manager Edwards and the staff for a very thorough, comprehensive presentation. And I appreciate very much the way you listed the accomplishments of the department and how you're making savings, but also the need for infrastructure and the priorities and replacement. And I appreciate that you said we're looking to be proactive rather than reactive. And I think we need to make that message to the public. I wanted to say some things that Bill Funderburk said about customer service. And this cannot be said too many times and cannot be overstated, that has got to be a priority of this department. Because as Bill mentioned, when we came on this board just about 2 years ago, next month, the customer service really didn't exist. When I would ask about customer service, people would look like, what? And we've come a long way, but we have a lot more to go, particularly with the hotlines, people calling in for emergencies. I know that in Sherman Oaks, where I live, we had a power outage, could not get through to anybody to say, what's happening? We just didn't know. And we need to make a link with, I think I spoke to David about this, with the mayor's office. People call 311. They have to be able to get directly to DWP to report this. But the customer service, as I say, has come a long way. We need to still work on the billing, and all that we've done in the past 2 years has been, I think, really dramatic. And this needs to be communicated to the public and to our ratepayers. And we have to keep making improvements. Now, the other thing that I really have to mention is a plus is public outreach. Because I remember sitting here some time ago when we were talking about reaching the public, and I said, well, what did you do? How did you get to the public? And there was a report that was put on a website, and people had to go to the library to look at it. And to me, that's not community outreach, expecting people to go to a library and read it. Now what we're really talking about is this ongoing process, meeting with the community, hearing what they have to say, letting them know the facts of the rate adjustments. And what is significant, that there will be a kickoff tomorrow night in the San Fernando Valley, where there's a warmer climate, higher temperatures, higher bills, tiered pricing. And it's significant that Marcie Edwards and her team will be coming to the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, where they will be speaking to all the councils in the San Fernando Valley. That's 34 neighborhood councils at once, to give the message that you had here today and to listen to what people say. And I think I just want to commend you that that's real community outreach, and that's what we need more of, because if we are going to talk about price adjustments, then it goes hand in hand with community outreach and customer service. You can't have one without the other. It's all got to be done together. So I'm very hopeful that by coming out to the community, listening to what they have to say, explaining that this is just the beginning of a process, that we're going to win over our ratepayers. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? Dr. Pickle?
In 2011, the city's Office of Public Accountability Ratepayer Advocate was created, and I was hired to fill that role in 2012. And our role is to provide independent analysis of things that affect rates, water and power rates, for the citizens of LA. This kicks off a review process by my office of this rate proposal. While DWP has shared with us tentative proposals over a period of almost 20 months, the proposals have changed substantially over time. One thing that the general manager, Marcie Edwards, referred to is an agreement that while this is a 5-year rate proposal, they would be willing to do a check-in and adjustment of these rates if necessary between years 2 and 3 of this rate case. That's also important because in the energy business and in the water business, the forecast is always wrong. So it's time to make adjustments for that. And there are a number of pass-through factors that are changing in this rate proposal, and it may be necessary to tweak those as well. So this office gives its report first to this DWP board, but we also are required to report to the city council, the mayor, the neighborhood councils, and the public. So you'll be hearing from us on this review. We have a professional staff full-time of 3, and we will be hiring additional consulting assistance for this process.